Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. The Mud Flood was the Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they are willing to debate you in a fair and honest way, hopefully looking for the truth. I do not want to oversimplify things tonight, but I have to. I was raised shoved down my throat. Keep it simple. It's always the best way. And later in life, I found out, you know what, with their quantum physics and everything else that is intentionally confusing because it doesn't work, there's a reason for that. So they can tell you, you just wouldn't understand. Now, let's look at some pictures after I show the disclaimer. Welcome, Salty Sergio. He's talking to Phil. Maybe Phil's in the house too, talking about those leather shoes. You know, there might be something to that grounding, right? I heard about that. Fair use disclaimer for everybody in the US of A or around the world. I don't know. Do you think they do this in North Korea? They got us jumping through the hoops. Some interesting pictures tonight. I hope they are everything I wanted them to be. Late to the party, I highlighted this. It's from Wikipedia talking about Japan at the end of World War II, August 9th. Wait, that's when the atomic bomb was supposedly dropped. They were keen to stay at peace with the Soviets and ultimately to achieve an end to the war. Since Yalta, they had repeatedly tried to convince the Soviets to extend the Neutrality Pact, as well as attempting to enlist them to mediate peace negotiation with the Western allies. The Soviets did nothing to discourage these overtures, instead, happy to draw out the process while they were planning to invade Japan hours after the second bomb was dropped. And the attack started when the first bomb was dropped. It's a fake. It's how they fake the history. The invasion fell between the American atomic bombing of Hiroshima on the 6th of August and only hours before the Nagasaki bombing. Those were fire bombs. Those weren't atomics. Everything they teach about history is a lie. It's the reset. It's what they do. They made nations because Satan wanted nations from the feudal kingdoms. The timing of the invasion had been planned well in advance and was determined by the timing of the agreements at Tehran and Yalta. Well, wow, was that 3 months earlier? They knew the date that they're going to. I wonder if the Americans said, "Hey, we're thinking about dropping a bomb on them then too." Well, he couldn't have because it was a secret. The invasion began on the 9th of August, exactly 3 months after the German surrender on May 8th, because there was that thing. You can't attack us for 3 months after the end of the war in Europe. So they waited, it says, looks like 43 seconds after the time they could, they did attack. In the movies, in their rewrite, to fake the bomb, to get you where you are right now. Hopefully, you're not one of those guys going, "Go save Israel, Trump." You, the vortex, you're an electric battery powered Taurus. I look at these. We're going to look at some of these rocks today. Yeah, that's happening in you, but there's a certain area in Nepal where some rocks just come out more defined of, being hit with the glittering sword right in the instance of a, looks like a heart vortex, a blood ball or something getting, you see, it's a push pull. Swastika, in with the good, out with the bad. This one is coming in, and this one is taking it to spread it out to the body. If it's a heart, Isn't that crazy? So look at that. There's Cokedale. You've all heard that in the mud flood stuff. Trinidad, Colorado. We were on the tornado warning list today. There must be, I mean, it can get windy here on top of this mountain, and we must be near one of those windows in heaven, that's for sure. Haku Ichu meant the bringing together of the corners of the world under one ruler, or the making of the world's one family. That's what Japan was trying to do, the imperial kingly way, moral goal, loyal to the emperor. Gonna get into that. What else we got here? Australian Prime Minister Billy Hughes clarified his position and announced at a meeting that 95 out of 100 Australians rejected the very idea of equality, talking about the Aborigines that were there. We're not. We're way above them. They didn't want them to be considered equal. You don't get the vote. And it wasn't only in Australia. Let's see what it says here in 1901. No government could live for a day in Australia if it tampered with a white Australia. Hughes stated, the position is this: either the Japanese proposal means something or it means nothing. So if the former, out with it. If it's the latter, why have it? It means something. That's the former. So out with it. And if it doesn't mean anything, why worry about it? Racism. What are people thinking? Japan in 1868 had not only the fulfillment of many domestic and foreign economic and political objectives, without Japan suffering the colonial fate of other Asian nations. So this is the American World War, Civil War had ended a few years earlier. They were approaching Japan. You've got to come out. And Japan, think about it. They didn't get colonized. They colonized. And they were ready to colonize other Asian countries. Turn something up there. Here's some pictures of some of those different style rocks that the thumbnail was taken from. We'll get into those tabs and, Lord willing, have a sufficient answer for you. Yeah, these are body parts. You're welcome. The Lord is going to be glorified. He will be magnified. He's to receive all the glory. They're close-up of the thumbnail. Or actually, that's a different one. It just looks the same. It obviously, here's some sort of a blood ball getting ready to do something. There's something weird going on here, people. The proposal was not pursued after political embarrassment or the realization that it would make the floral emblem of Australia illegal. The golden wattle is sarcotropic, which means I'm at the end of my situation there. I hope you got to see that. I just found this shirt. I had some stuff sent out to the laundry, and it must have been covered up for quite a while because it came back with my summer clothes. It's the Bible verse, and on the back it says, wherever he leads, which was nice. A lady asked me one time, who is he? Because she could only see me from the back. I'm like, oh, Jesus? She was very relieved, it seemed like. So, but we don't know. For all we know, she could have been a Mormon in this area. Let's see how we're going to prove it. Keeping it simple. Vortex, whatevers. Husharan Greater Eastern Conference. What is this? It's a political slogan meaning the divine right of the Empire of Japan to unify the 8 corners of the world. And it meant their area. They were trying to say at that time, we're taking over this part of China. They've been in it for a long time. They've beaten Russia. They beat a lot of people. They helped England and their king were great friends. It would have been hard to imagine World War I ending as in the favor without Japan on England's side and France. So I shall cover the 8 directions of my abode. So this kind of looks like a flat Earth thing. So that's their 8 directions. I really don't know what if this is a crown or what. Let me refresh my memory. Does it say? I have to find it in the text. 1940, okay. Peace Tower. They wanted everybody to think, they came out of the reset. They say the white Americans found them and said, you got to start trading. And they said, okay. And they learned how to do it and almost took over the world. So they say. Nishan Run was another one of their southern expansion. This was a political doctrine of the Empire of Japan that was allies with the Nazis, in Bulgaria and Italy and the other smaller axes. So the opposing, this one here, it stated, but for Manchuria, Siberia, they were going to run all this. So they were telling everybody, but as they got more and more powerful, people started going, you know what if they're too strong? So they were an empire. What's next?
Made their views more negative. Even 32% of the conservative-leaning students said it had made their views of the United States more negative. So how do we explain this extraordinary change in the climate of campus life, which I can assure you happened fast? It happened in the space of about 10 years, because I don't remember any of this when I first began teaching in the United States. Well, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff wrote The Coddling of the American Mind to make the argument that it was essentially bad ideas that had taken hold between parenting, high schools, and social media. Bad ideas like, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, sort of anti-Nietzschean view, or always trust your feelings, or life really is a battle between good people and evil people.
So it looks like Sir Nigel Ferguson, Treason of the Intellectuals, how Nazis conquered the German schools. And it's, he had one about Operation Paperclip. And it's the Jewish thing.
Cancel initiatives that has come from the left has risen. And really you don't see much from the right, but that's of course because there isn't much of a right on most campuses. I remember realizing that one could fit the Stanford College Republicans into a really quite small room.
Boy, I'll tell you, something's going on with our world. Let's see what scriptures I got pulled up here. Even in Jeremiah, interesting creation, because the Bible is written here a little, there a little. Line upon line, you have to find it because it's a collection of writings, a book of remembrance, a condensed version that is enough and approved by God for us to be saved. English Standard Version. When he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain, and he brings forth the wind from his storehouses. The verse before that goes, the Lord made the earth by his power. He established the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heavens by Sophia. Wisdom, this is wise. It might seem, this says understanding by his wisdom. Now I thought the wisdom would be the Sophia, but it's Bihakamato. And it means wit, skill, wisdom. So it is a different kind of wisdom, but there's more than one kind of wisdom. You got to be careful when you spit those out, going like, that could be Sophia, because this one's not. But it's good to be wise. What other Bible verse we got? Oh, I just wanted to remind you that after everything at the end, of course, they do have, they had very accurate records, unlike what we have right now. After everything with the false king that allowed Nebuchadnezzar to destroy it, Jehoiakim, and this is proven, this is one of those things that they found in history. In the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the 12th month of the 25th day of the month, evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, graciously freed Jehoiakim of Judah and brought him out of the prison. And he spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat above the seats of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put off his prison garments, and every day of his life he dined regularly at the king's table. And for his allowance, a regular allowance was given to him by the king according to his daily needs until the day of his death. And that's a wonderful, portion, because there is that, they found that. That's part of history. Well, this is supposed to be
I was
here.
actually shocked, organized crime and or intelligence, right? So I think, in their cases, part of it is motivated by, those other connections behind the scenes. Because if you consider, the early history of Israel, for example, some of these organized crime linked oligarchs we've discussed, the Bronfman family.
Like when she's mentioning Brockmans and Myra Lansky, she's talking about, it's funny how casually, because in her mind, she associates the CIA and the mafia. They're the same.
Family, for example, instrumental in arming the Haganah, the precursor to the IDF, for example. A lot of these, mob figures collaborated with Mossad, including Lansky himself in the 60s and 70s. Lansky and his, his illicit empire, intimately connected to not just early financial sources and resources for organized crime, like Tibor Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum was also a major funder of Mossad, right? Of early Mossad. And so a lot of these same figures, over time,
it's the mob. It's always been the mob. And now we know it. Oh, no, not America helps the mob.
Before 1948, and a lot of those mobsters, particularly that were part of the Jewish mob, Bugsy Siegel, Lansky, etc., were involved in moving weapons to these paramilitary groups that were later folded into the IDF, including the Haganah. And some of them were big backers also of Menachem Begin and what proto-Likud, I guess.
We pronounce that Menachem Begin.
Yes. Which is actually interesting because, Lansky developed, basically the reason he was so successful, at least early on, was because he teamed up with aspects of the Italian mafia. So before that, organized crime in the US were sort of in these ethnic sides.
Bingo. Thank you, Whitney.
as far as, since you asked about Epstein and the Israeli state, and I kind of got off on a tangent there. He's really alleged to have been working more closely with Israeli military intelligence, not necessarily Mossad. And this comes from people that, were in Israeli military intelligence that worked with him. Of course, his affiliation with the Maxwell family, who are known to have been Israeli intelligence assets, and not just Robert Maxwell, but also in like Palm Beach, the Palm Beach Post, for example. Epstein was touring military bases in Israel. So that's kind of interesting if you're just a regular guy charged with a crime in another country.
A lot of weird things going on, right? Hey, I'm going to keep it rolling.
This. They nominated the person who had been instrumental to Mormons coming to Utah through his discovery of the Great Basin itself and mapping much of it, then subsequently helping to secure the conquest of California. John C. Fremont had been the key figure in California rebelling and therefore securing the Southwest for the United States, so Mormons had directly benefited from him. Now, as a Republican nominee, he had a new stance to deal with them. Before the Republican Convention of 1856, the coverage of Utah outrages combined with concerns over slavery, especially the constant stream of books with titles like Mormonism Unveiled, that had plagued the new religion from its beginning and grew to a torrent in the 1850s, colored the delegates' perception of the religion. So the Republican platform specifically stated they wanted to prohibit in the territories those twin relics of barbarism: polygamy and slavery. Both of.
All right. So I do want to go on the record that I'm very anti-Mormon. And the fact that there is even still a Mormon religion when people were exposing it at the time of going, totally unbiblical, totally unbiblical. It doesn't matter when the Freemasons are going to have it. They're going to make it happen. They have death vows after they join. It's like, you're going to Utah. Okay. It all happened from the reset. This is the short season. This is the reset. All of their history is fill in the blanks. Use these people to give them a cover story. It's a cover story. Did you guys like that when they had the comments along with the situation?
Of which Mormons were
I'll put 'em
doing.
up.
Fremont did not win the presidency, but Republicans gained a foothold in Congress.
Anyway, there's just stuff about the Mormons. Here's some more. Go.
In immigration history. The handcart pioneers continued for a few more years, even though enthusiasm for the scheme had diminished tremendously. In fact, enthusiasm in Utah abated rapidly because of the Reformation. In an attempt to purify the territory, many residents were simply pushed out. Young noticed all the apostates leaving and praised their disaffection, saying, "I'd rather you would go than stay." The moment a person decides to leave this people, he is cut off from every object that is durable for time and eternity.
Wow. Man, could you imagine being scared by something like that? It would have to be a death vow, because if you read the Bible, you'd know this is a Freemason hoax because we're in the short season. But well, we didn't know anything about the flat earth nation, the golden age past, because the mud flood was Armageddon yet, did we?
On it was a capital of bronze.
That's just what I was listening to.
Other power brokers. The home in the area had been outfitted with security cameras to capture the illegal sexual activity. These tapes would be sold to other players to twist votes and force political capitulation. Bonacci claims that he was interviewed by the Omaha Police Department on several occasions. He even provided documentation of aggressors, including photographic evidence. However, nothing came from these investigations. Bonacci and Owen suggested that Caradori pursue Rusty Nelson, who likely had a surplus of photographic negatives. They could secure physical evidence of their testimony. On July 9th, 1990, Caradori flew a 1984 single-engine Piper Saratoga from Lincoln to Chicago with his 8-year-old son. They were going to attend the MLB All-Star Game. Caradori told his wife that he would be meeting Rusty Nelson while in Chicago. Caradori made 4 phone calls while there, speaking with Lauren Schmidt, his wife, and 2 others. In one phone call, he stated that he would be acquiring photographs and other materials that would corroborate the testimony from his remaining 2 victims. Rusty Nelson would later confirm that he met with Caradori in Chicago and provided him with photographic negatives that would be the linchpin in the Franklin case. The All-Star Game ended around 11:45 p.m., and the Caradoris departed Chicago's Midway Airport at 1:51 a.m. An hour later, the plane crashed in a cornfield in Ashton, Illinois. Debris was scattered up to 1,800 feet from the fuselage, and an investigation determined that the plane had broken up mid-flight. 2 years later, it would be speculated. Whispers about financial mismanagement at the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union continued throughout the 1980s. In 1981, an anonymous letter was sent to the National Credit Union Association about misdeeds, and a limited investigation uncovered $400,000 in missing funds. In 1984, Edward Hobbs wrote a letter to the Franklin Board detailing embezzlement at the credit union. He was a former teller at the bank, and he was fired the day after sharing his letter. From 1984 to 1988, the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union escaped watchdog audits from federal organizations. King and several of his employees delayed and excused these potential audits to cover up their theft. But in 1988, the National Credit Union Association closed Franklin for unsafe and unsound practices, and a forensic financial accounting was conducted.
All right, I better give you a background, a real quick reminder of what that Franklin, child prostitution ring happened there in Omaha, and how the Bushes and everybody, well, it was a big deal. Okay, it was a child prostitution allegations, business figures flying children around the country for sex, but then carefully crafted hoax. It's a hoax. This guy goes to jail. This was not a hoax. The children, again, told about devil worship, cannibalism, drug trafficking, and CIA arms dealing. But since only the conspirators believed them, it was just called the big hoax. It was just decided they wanted to fake it to make it seem like Republicans liked the gays as much as the others, as much as a Roman Catholic or somebody like that. So that's what we're talking about here. These guys, maybe we'll need a little more something,
On June 10th, 1985, a social worker with the Nebraska Department of Social Services received a call from the Sheriff's Department in Washington County. Records indicate the call was about child abuse complaints under the foster care of Jarrett and Barbara Webb. Jarrett was a board member of the Franklin Credit Union, and Barbara was Lawrence King's cousin. The call...
And honestly, I'm going to be skipping around, but you have to go back into the 70s and realize, what's a credit union? Well, you know what it is, but it was new back then, 20, 30 years old, but they were finally figured out how they can get rich and use fractional type banking. It was just messed up a little bit more.
Still grappling with the unresolved allegations of child abuse and exploitation. Some believed that justice had been done. They believed that the allegations of child abuse had come from compromised witnesses, the testimonies of children who had suffered difficult lives by any measure, compounded by drug use, sexual abuse, and more. They believed that these children had suffered greatly, but they had ultimately been confused or coached by investigators and social workers. Satanic panic was at its peak in the 1980s and 1990s. It was a period of heightened fear about demonic ritual abuse, and it had become public hysteria. In short, they believed that the stories were too salacious and sensational to be true. Others found the testimony of the videotaped witnesses to be compelling. They pointed to historical precedents for cover-up, indicating that those in positions of power wielded undue influence to dismiss and discredit witnesses. They believed that law enforcement had been deliberately inept, and the system had not only failed to find justice, but actually contributed to the harm of the outspoken victims. In 1994, a British television company known as Yorkshire Television produced a documentary titled Conspiracy of Silence. The documentary was developed in cooperation with the Discovery Channel. It sought to publicize and explore the allegations of child abuse and exploitation surrounding the Franklin scandal. It was scheduled to air on Discovery, and the event was printed in the TV Guide for its debut time slot. At the last minute, the Discovery Channel unexpectedly pulled the documentary from the broadcast schedule shortly before its airing. While the official reason was not named, it's believed that legal and political pressures were responsible. The suppression of the documentary is one more talking point for those who believe the Franklin scandal was the result.
I don't see why this guy, the Pandox, can't understand that that would be part of a carefully crafted hoax. That is one meticulously, carefully crafted hoax. How about those pictures the Lord provided right on time? Thank you, Father. What we got here? Oh, okay. There's a carefully, intricately crafted hoax. They faked it. Good job. I wonder how much they paid those families to do that. Who else was in it? Well, they didn't mention too many names. Somebody got 15 years in prison. Somebody got 4.5. They concluded that the abuse allegations were unfounded and indicted the girl that was the alleged victim on 8 counts of perjury. Wow. And she had to go. She's the one that did 4.5 years. Wow. The guy pleaded guilty and gave back 39 million. Wow. I wonder how much time he actually spent.
Continues with another lone chakra, but where boundaries match boundaries.
So the people, other religions have gotten into the stones are crying out. In case you didn't notice, it's not only Flat Earth Nation now. We're on a very narrow road. People are going to have to say, I'm on the Flat Earth Nation, Golden Age past, Mud Flood was Armageddon bandwagon, or I'm not. I'm on some other bandwagon.
The Eozoon canadense was described as a gigantic foraminifera found in Precambrian metamorphosed limestone in Quebec. In 1894, it was instead recognized to be associated with metamorphism and deemed a pseudofossil. Due to its size and Precambrian location, people adequately doubted the interpretation.
Yeah.
But when the pseudofossil is of a scale seemingly appropriate and found in geological settings deemed appropriate, a false conclusion can go unnoticed for centuries. And when the most clear evidence that ammonites are not fossils is found in remote Himalayan stones, revered and sacred in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, it is easy for the scientific process to not consider unequivocal evidence that disproves countless major scientific claims while opening up a can of Kitas.
Anyway, either proves that Vishnu did it or Lord Jesus did it. So I'm going to stick with the Bible because I've been warned and I'm going to stick with it. So Shalagram. How about that? We learned a new word. They're cool. I like them. Body part, body part. Hey, there's a body part. I should show some more. Okay, so he did it, right? Okay. In the 1940s, they got a pelican head watching over the, you are now going to be like their version of Jesus. Okay, sure. Whatever. They got dressed up with a little leaf. Looks like a good one, though. That's busy. That's a big one. That's a big one. That's a Titan. I wish they showed some of the close-ups of it that made it, you know, the distinctions of it. What do they say about it? So one more. What about the location? They're found all over, but these black ones like that are the Brahma Sutras. These are all faked, like Mohammed, Buddha, Confucius. They're all made up as versions to cover up why people all of a sudden just changed and became good, loving their neighbor and all of that. Well, maybe there was something in the where he says they only come from one location.
Science was conceived of, these stones were documented, and their nature was described in various Hindu scriptures. There are several legends of how these stones formed. In one story found in the Brahma Vaivarta, Padma, and Varaha Puranas, the Hindu
Where'd they
goddess
find them? That's what
Tulsi
we're
was
looking for
friended in a
here,
previous
dude.
birth who became. They are described scientifically as concretions containing fossils such as ammonites, belemnites, and crinoids. While commonly
Here.
found in the Kaligandaki River, in Hindu beliefs, the nearby lake known as Damodar Kund
Vortex
is
Lake.
considered the birthplace of shalagrams. Damodar means roped around the abdomen or belly in Sanskrit, referring to a story where
You sound boring, Steve. He does some good pictures of rocks. I'm going to do some good pictures of rocks. I'm going to be like Steve. What's this? Oh, a little early for the tornado.
A really cool view from Stormrunner Media of the sun setting. This back over in Kansas. Beautiful little sunset. We also watched them inside of the east here over the last few minutes. It'll be going towards Leedy and eventually towards Camargo. The storm itself has been taking a little bit of a right turn here over the last few minutes. We also have another severe storm that fired up back off to the west of Cherokee. That is going to be for quarter-sized hail and 60-mile-per-hour winds. And as we've already kind of alluded to, all three of these areas of storms are all going to kind of merge into one at some point later this evening, which should turn into a pretty intense mesoscale convective system as this eventually moves off to the east. So be ready for this line of storm, or be ready for this to turn into a line of storms here over the next few hours. But we got a lot of rain coming towards.
We'll save that. We're going to come back to it. Now, SO2 gas, Paco's looking that up. What is he going to do? I'm scared. I've ordered, I don't know, close to $800 worth of equipment. I'm going to do that. Just try to find some gold thing, and the last time I did it, it's pretty dangerous. And I don't think I took it serious enough. And I did breathe, I caught the whiff, and I don't even want to do that this time. So I'm nervous, man. I've got this stuff. I'm going to do it. I thought I had a thing about SO2 gas. We'll just pull one up, a video of it. Somebody doing it. So this is what I want to try. I ordered this. It's out for delivery. This will be a challenge finding a way to get the beakers and stuff. And it is somehow, this turns it back into gold. Yeah, I'm nervous. Because, I'm only trying one little rock. And then you add some other stuff to it and it makes it gold dust. The one by Street Tips is better. But enough. What? So anyway, after the reset, there used to be, during the golden age, and we've all seen the pictures of how they dressed and how they pretended to act like Christians. They were ruled with a rod of iron, it wasn't a perfect time, and it certainly wasn't Jesus sitting on a throne in fake Jerusalem. It was this.
Direction. Feudalism is what we in the science biz call an unstable equilibrium. See, with feudalism, there's really no such thing as a national army.
There's no nation.
You have your own army and your own land, but there are 1,000 other lords, and if any of them teamed up, they could kill you pretty easily. So rather than spend your life playing 1,000 player Risk, you cozy up to the biggest, most powerful lord and ask if he'll use his army to fight anyone if they attack you. He says, "What's in it for me?" You tell him he can use your army if you're not using it, and he gets to call himself a king. If you're a lord, that's great. If you're a king, that's pretty good. You get to be king, but you still have the problem that there are 1,000 lords who each have an army. Your army might be bigger than anybody else's, but it's not bigger than everybody else's. Historically, there have been many ways of resolving.
So that's how they did it for 1,000 years. And then they wanted you to believe this.
Trust me. How dare you? All I'm asking is for you to stay neutral. You can do that for me, can't you? We're both going to hell for this. But don't expect England to give in so easily. I'll pay you to stay out of the war. Sweet, no problem.
They're jumping rope. This guy, man, he's killing me.
I'll pay you to stay out of the war. Sweet, no problem. I'll pay you more if you attack the Netherlands. Nice. And you have to become Catholic. Well, okay. Louis continued to get away with little wars like this, here and there,
Yeah, Louis did it. The sun god.
Oh, no,
And it's the
children, Louis.
Habsburgs.
But that means... Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. What's the matter? Leopold, Holy Roman Emperor? The next king of Spain. He's either going to be your son, or mine.
This is their history. These are the guys that there's still some of these Habsburgs ruling in these whatever countries they got going over there. They're small, the Liechtensteins and whatever. Switzerland's Sun King.
Balance of power, Louis, the balance of power. I know. There must be another option. Think, darn it. I've got it. The Holy Roman Emperor. He has a grandson, Joseph Ferdinand, through his daughter.
Uh-oh. Is that Ferdinand? It's another Ferdinand. Couple more minutes.
You want to give Spain to the Habsburgs? They're Habsburgs already. This is just another spin-off branch. Spain and the Holy Roman Empire will never be united. I want some of their land in Italy. We split the land in Italy, 50-50 between you and Emperor Leopold. The rest,
Now, the AI, they like to keep it simple, don't they? They want to oversimplify it. And all you have to believe is that their priests in Rome here, they came up with the globe. And now, if you don't believe in that, you can't really advance. You're always going to be flat earther.
goes to Joseph Ferdinand. Deal. Shut up, Spain! No one asked you! Except then, Joseph Ferdinand dies. And, like, the clock is ticking. I can't figure out what's wrong with him! Just keep him breathing! Peace in Europe depends on— Well, I'll take all the Italian holdings, trade Lorraine for Milan. We're still off. Aha! If I transfer Naples and Sicily to Sardinia in exchange for Nice and Savoy, then I'll just need one small county from Spain proper. By Jove, I think we've done it. Why wasn't—
Yay!
The Order of the Thistle 2. The cameo is set in a gold swiveling frame, and around it are 24 large diamonds that are interspersed with smaller stones, the whole thing suspended from a loop with a diamond-studded bow. This Lesser George was part of the—
Look at that little swisher. He got his little Freemason thing going.
that Queen Victoria gave to Prince Albert on the 8th of February 1840, a couple of days before their wedding. The cameo and the stones were taken from the collection of previous sovereigns. The cameo is the work—
People used to call up stores and ask them, do you have this guy in a can? And if they said yes, you'd go, let him out. This is Prince Albert, the royal garter.
presented to them the graves of Arthur and Guinevere, whose bones had been allegedly discovered there in 1278. In 1334, the 22-year-old king begins to formulate the idea of creating a new order of knights of the Round Table with him and Queen Philippa.
This is their
and
fake
also
history.
Arthur and Guinevere. In 1344, Edward holds a joust at Windsor, in which he makes a promise to found a fraternity of the Round Table with 300 knights as members. He even began to construct an enormous circular building around 200 feet in
I
diameter.
feel like I'm building this up too much, but it's got king, it's got that whole St. George thing.
Dragon is initially happy with 2 sheep daily, but then he ups his demands to a man and a sheep, then in the end demanding the lives of the children of the city. The king agrees to the demands and the victims are chosen by lot, but eventually the lot falls on the daughter of the king. And the king offers all his gold and silver to the people if they choose another person and spare his daughter. But they say no, and the princess is led out to be eaten by the dragon. It's at that point that our hero St. George just happens to be passing on his horse, and he sees what's going on and tries, despite her protests, to save the princess. St. George makes the sign of the cross, charges the dragon and wounds him with his lance. He calls to the princess and asks her to throw him his girdle, which he places over the dragon's neck, and he and the princess lead the dragon back into the city. St. George offers to kill the dragon if the terrified people convert to the Christian faith, which they all do, and St. George beheads the dragon with his sword. Now, St. George, with his combination of military prowess, courage in the face of great adversity, and Christian piety, became a hero for Christian warriors.
And I think we know how big of a hero he is. I might have let that go on a little bit too long, but a little bit more right here.
Is then placed a cloak called a mantle of dark blue velvet, to which a red hood is attached. Over the mantle, since the late 15th century, has been worn a collar tied to it with white silk ribbon, from which is suspended a badge or pendant called the Great George. On a knight's head, since the time of Henry VIII, has been worn a velvet hat.
They are a cute couple in Otherworld.
With ostrich feathers. Since the late 16th century, on occasions when the formality—
I heard this guy is a real fiend. Same with this girl. Well, they're past now, well, see what your focus here. Look at the garter on their leg. They're members of the Order of the Garter. I don't know if you have to eat children to get into it or what.
Of these full robes and insignia were not appropriate or were impractical. Knights have tended to wear a blue ribbon or sash from which is suspended a second pendant that is called by the 18th century. A star has also been worn, pinned or sewn to clothing when this lesser George is used. The
Isn't that weird?
mantle, the garter, and the hood are the earliest elements of the insignia and were worn from the very beginning of
Okay, the garter, the garter, the garter.
wide and thickly gathered material of the past was replaced by a neat sash of kingfisher blue silk tied at the waist by a bow.
Only certain people dress like that. Only certain people could afford it and think it's normal.
To the king's grandson, the future King George III, at his installation as a Garter Knight, and it remained part of his Garter insignia for the rest of his life.
A garter, right? This is a big deal to these people. I mean, they don't give those away. Look at, is it that guy again? Is that Prince Albert again? What are you doing?
Victoria gave to Prince Albert on the 8th of February 1840, a couple of days before their wedding. The cameo and the stones were taken from the collection of previous sovereigns. The cameo is the work of Edmund Birch, a well-known gem engraver and royal academician, and probably dates from around 1760.
For all we know, it dates to 1760 BC. A little history on the Order of the Garter. The order includes extra members whose number do not count toward the limit of 24. Several extra members known as Royal Knights and Ladies of the Garter belong to the royal family. Like, I don't know if you caught it in the video, but founded by Edward III. They say, take away the 1,000, this much into the 1,000-year reign of Christ. All of a sudden, you know, like, look at us, you know, we got something special going on here, and we got garters. I can't believe there's 111 pictures. We're not going to look at more than 20, 25, maybe more, like 100. This is the one is the Emperor of Japan. He's not an extra. He's full boat. He's in it. So whatever, 1868, they forced Japan to start trading. You're going to be like the other white countries. Okay. And here's your reward. Dig it, man. How do I look? You look dashing, like one of the 24. Looks as white as those guys and her. She's not a witch. Stop it. And they just took over, you know, the old buildings from the old world, cleaned them out and said, look at me. I'm a member of the noble. This is their second highest. It's the oldest, but there is a more prominent one. So it looks like a lot of them were going to be old flags. That one kind of jumped out at me. Let's see what that one was. Well, there's the dragon. He's 1841. Is that what that is? That's a phoenix. It's in the order. You know what? Extra body parts, summary, you know? Summary means extra. It's how you get those polydactyls. They say that's a real X-ray from somebody that has 6 fingers today. Don't tell me he can't be saved. Don't tell me he can't be saved. So this Tashio era, dating from 1912 to 1926, this guy, huh? Is that the guy? Is that the Gardner boy? He does look, you look like one of those, you look related to the English people, dude. So he won a couple wars. He took that country over the top. He kicked Russians' ass. And then they built these cities. Sure, they did. And they partied because they built another, this, look what we built. They didn't build it either. So anyway, they say he was a sickly man. I don't get that from his pictures and stuff, but that's what they say. He was a peaceful liberal movement, but after it was chaos preceding, followed by a militaristic Showa era. But he's the one that gave them the money, the Tao of heaven. His name meant great righteousness. Like a pope, he takes his own name, he makes it up. They did get some change. Any male could vote. That's male suffrage. The social warfare, workers' rights, maybe they had some unions. It says, and nonviolent protest were ideals of the early leftist movement. Well, according to who? Citation needed. I don't think Marx and Engels, they would argue about, should it happen fast or slow, but there was going to be a fight. So it's going through history. And remember, our guy, he becomes a hero to Britain because he saves them. World War I permitted our garter-wearing emperor from Japan, which fought with the victorious allies before they were Axis, and just short amount of World War II later, quickly occupied. As soon as they declared war on Germany, they went in and took over China, Mariana, Marshall Islands, these things they fought about later. We'll be fighting soon, who knows? So they had a foothold in China before the rape of Nanking for 30 years at least, going on 30 years. And it was like the United States. Hey, look, we're inventing planes and we're rebuilding the bridges and we have industry, aren't we? Look at Japan in China. Mandates, this is going to be our area. All the other white nations were saying, here's the ones that we're going to colonize. Okay. American panics. I'm glad I saved some of that. So I wonder if they mention any of the wars at the end of this. Not really. Let's keep it rolling. So here's the conference, the peace conference, where Japan's going like, wait a minute, you're treating us like we're not white after we just helped you win World War I? Oh, that's not that part yet. But during the peace conference, it said a formal, informal diplomatic meeting, 1919. So we're in our, the century before us now. I was born in 1958. World War I had ended. Couldn't have done it without Japan. So they're going to do a League of Nations, and Woodrow Wilson is there. He has the 14 points. Let's see the picture. They're going to figure out the whole world. That looks fake. It's computer rewrite. All to hide the fact that mud flood was Armageddon. The golden age is past, and how these white guys get in power? Well, they came ready to go, wolves in sheep's clothing. And then after the 1,000 years and the reaping, they still wolves in sheep's clothing. The earth's a globe. They built those buildings. Yeah, right. Palestine, the Pico, Sykes-Picot, the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. The man we studied earlier, the Sun King Louis XIV, he supposedly built that so that he could get all of the feudal kings to come there. Now, I know it's a mystery. There's no bathrooms in it. Oh, no, they must have been angels. It's one of there's not very many buildings that don't have bathrooms in them. It's one of them. It's weird. It's not UFOs, okay? It's something just weird. But obviously they had the fountains, they had everything, but it's all tying together to us now being judged, waiting for Donald Trump to save us. What is the racial thing that Japan wanted? The proposal for equality. How did it, why does it end with, after the Nazis gained power in Germany, Germany decided not to expel Jewish refugees from China, Manchuria, and Japan, and advocated 8 crown cords, 1 roof, all the world under one roof. They wanted that League of Nations thing to work and just have peace. Is that possible? After they helped win World War I at the peace conference proposed by Japan, it says, to abolish racial discrimination. And it didn't mean against Japanese. They weren't discriminated against. It meant against the people that they were going to colonize. Proposed by Japan, it was never intended to have universal implications, but one was attached to it anyway, which caused its controversy. Stated in 1919 that the proposal was intended not to demand the racial equality of all colored peoples, but only that of members in the League of Nations. And the other nations were going, yeah, look, just because the King of England has a thing for the King of Japan doesn't mean we think he's white too. And England and Japan are going like, what? What do you mean? Sorry, Japan, you didn't get to be white. Your racial equality proposal was scoffed at and pretended that it was never gonna, it was just a joke. Though it was broadly supported, the proposal did not become part of the treaty. Wait a minute. So everybody agreed. I was saying it was the United States and Canada and Australia. They were the ones that said, everybody else was all on board with like, yeah, we like Japan. They saved us. In America, with their wicked stepsons, Canada and Australia, said, no, are you kidding me? They're not white. So they had that same thing that the United Nations has today, where they had veto power. They just said, yeah, we're making a law that now it has to be unanimous. And since it's not unanimous, you're not white. Was it something like that? Was it something like that? So it was largely supported. It did not become part of the treaty because of opposition by the United States and the dominions of the United States evil stepsons. These guys, New Zealand, you're always thrown in there like you are actually something like Canada. No, you are something. You are. J. Crew wouldn't have a market left today if it wasn't for you guys. Wow, where'd that dig come from? The 1990s called and they want their sarcasm back, Paco. Okay, they can have it because it doesn't work here. Anyway, gosh, this guy reminded me right off the bat of that actor that is the famous actor, the Robert Duvall, plays the cowboys and the gangsters and anything. What is the racial Jim Crow laws? Late 1800 were enforced in the South. They really, just talk about it like, oh, it was focused on separation in the workplace and mindset. Separation in the workplace and mindset. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, artificial intelligence. Maybe you know what you mean. If it's anything like what I think, they're planning our mindset. During this time, it was difficult for blacks to find a job. Jim Crow was abolished in 1960. That's it. Where was this freedom of everything? This is a pretty short, we've seen some long Wikipedia things in our time. One picture of Freemasonic ode to the Prince Hall Freemasons. I guess that you don't press the nickel on the leader of the, I don't know their whole things. I don't got that kind of time. But you'd think that, the definition of racial equality wouldn't start with, there were slaves in the South, they struggled, but now it's okay because he had a vision. Sure he did. Okay. The NAACP showed up. Where's this stuff about Japan? And oh, well, it's over. They did some sit-ins. They do admit that the white people didn't want nothing to do with no black people. They said, forget it. In my world, I always like to ask the question, do you know what the one drop rule is? I'm not talking about the one drop rule South Africa. I'm talking about the one drop rule that was a legal principle of racial classification prominent in the 1900s of the United States of America. We got Operation Paperclip because we taught the Nazis. We fought Japan even being considered white. It was us. And we had laws passed in the 1900s that asserted that any person that had one drop of black blood, and black could be Native American, not white, which is why we had the white baseball leagues and the black baseball leagues. We had white movies and black movies. In the white movies, if you were black, you were going to be a porter on a train and you were going to be called Charles, or you were going to be a cab driver, or you were going to be a maid. You've all seen those movies and now it's clicking. That was our world, and we're covering that up right now because we're in the last time, and whatever they're selling right now is gay. It's the gay thing. They want you to think that your child might be right, that it was born in the wrong sex, and it knows it intuitively because it's been feeling it for a long time. Oh, so the one drop rule, it says that it's a concept codified into law. It was predominant. It says in some U.S. states in the early 1900s, it was systemic. And it was the principle of invisible blackness, which is why they would fire some people and they go like, we just found out that you have some black blood from 1812. Well, this is 1920 and I work at Macy's department store. You're fired. Thanks, Donald Trump. Worst impression ever. I'll do a better one. You're fired. That's the same one. It's the same one. prior to colonization and still in traditional communities, the idea of determining belonging to a degree of blood was and is unheard of. Tribes didn't use, I mean, they use it today, but they never even heard about it until the government said, well, if you want these monies, you're going to have to get on board. And they said, go to hell for a couple of years. And they said, how much? Because that whole Great Depression thing was not a laughing matter. That was like, wow, they starving people in America. Who is that John Birch Society? How did it happen? Birch, along with 2 American pilots who had died in a crash, were interred in side-by-side crypts. A Roman Catholic service was held in the cathedral by Italian Jesuit priests in China. 24 Chinese carried them to their coffins. Full military honors. John Birch was the 5th of 5 OSS, future CIA, combat casualties in China. So what went down? Oh, he's a missionary who was a spy. Okay. And got in confrontation with Chinese communists. During an assignment he was ordered on by the OSA. This is after we went over the ending of the fake war with the fake bombs. So John Birch used him in 1958 and said he was the first martyr in the Cold War. And they're the ones, the Presbyterians that I've told you about, I got hooked up with Christian Liberty Academy, found out that they funded it all. And I was, my head spinning, working for the largest Christian homeschool supply company. And the Lord showed me, we're the bad guys. This is a Jesuit organization. Our logo and slogan is the Jesuit thing. And the preterism, I loved it. It was post-millennialism, 70 AD, but it wasn't golden age past. I had to get out of there. You know, I did leave and I ended up, you know, resigning and going to another job, but it was always going to be, from that point on, I knew it was the John Birch Society, and that was still 4 or 5 years before I had the vision of like, Mud Flood was Armageddon. But it was John Birch then, it's John Birch now. These are the guys that did it. They had the money, and I am not against homeschooling, but their plan was genius as always. The schools are going to be so poisoned. The only ones that are going to be able to help them as their aides and clerks, news people and communicators are going to have to know how to read and write and do that arithmetic. But they also have to be brainwashed into manifest destiny. The fact that the United States truly is a light on a hill given by a Trinity God. And you have to worship that Trinity God. That's not devious. It says that John Birch was always angry as a young man, always a zealot. Didn't bat an eye. Time to go to war. Let's go to war. So now the actual death. Here it gives you the, it'll take you a while to get up on there's complicit with the Chinese, there's complicit with the Japanese Chinese, there's complicit with the Russian Chinese, and they're all trying to decide. Now the FBI and everybody thought the conservative capitalist Chiang Kai-shek was going to be put in charge. But oh no, it was Mao Zedong. So there was a whole lot of backstabbery going on right about this time after they faked the atomic weapons in Japan. If you've recently joined us, like I see a number have, you need to go back because I do go over how that happened. His death. After the formal Japanese surrender on August 15th, remember the second fake bomb was only on the 9th, the day that the 30 days after when Soviet Union joined in against Japan in China with the United States and their adopted evil brothers, Canada, especially Australia. Let's see who else was there. Well, it was mostly, China was there fighting Japan. So United States, Britain, America, and then of course, Soviet Union. Germany was in a shambles. They didn't help, but they were ready for Operation Paperclip. Anyway, so there it is a week after. The CIA OSS agents in China were ordered to northern China to take the surrender of Japanese commanders at their installation. That sounds very straightforward. Chinese communists who controlled much of the mountain area were supposedly allies with the United States. Well, it looks like the United States and Britain aren't the only one who can make some secret treaties with backstabbery, because it was not going to be Chiang Kai-shek, the man who the United States helped all through the war. It was going to be that commie. They were supposedly allies with the United States, but were not allowed to accept the surrender. Birch told a friend that he was not worried about going into communist-controlled territory since he had worked with the communists many times and never had no trouble at all. He left 5 days later on a train for Xi'an and Jiangsu, where a Japanese facility and airfield was located. In command of a group consisting of 2 American soldiers, the captain, they also had another civilian CIA operative, 5 Chinese officers, 2 Koreans who spoke Japanese. They're going to accept a surrender. But Birch's mission, under direct orders from Lieutenant General Albert C. Wademeyer, the commander of U.S. forces in China, that's up there. You're going to go to Shandong province to seize Japanese documents, obtain information on airfields. Wow. Float, get on the boat, go there, get the prisoners of war. This is getting to be more of a spy mission, okay? So after 2 nights in a nearby village, he boards the train with the Chinese general as orderly. 45 miles from Zhengzhou, the train was stopped, informed the light ahead had been sabotaged. They press on. A Japanese patrol, but we don't know who's the good guys or the bad guys here. They arrive by handcar. Yeah, we can't wait to help surrender. So they replace the rails, prepare the track. Later that day, Birch goes by handcar with his group and the orderly. Over a mile down the line, they run into a group of 300 armed communists. That's Mao Zedong. They're Chinese, but they don't want to confuse you by saying Chinese. Birch and Lieutenant Tung, who was his aide, were told to surrender their weapons and equipment, which included 3 radios. Birch was wearing his army uniform, identified himself, refused to turn over his weapon after arguing. They were allowed to proceed. Further along the way, he encountered another group of commies. And they could not continue by handcar. When they finally arrived at the railway station, they were met by another 20 soldiers. Identified himself and again tried the old, I'm refusing to give up my sidearm. And they said, shoot him. So they shot his friend, hit him in the head with a rifle butt. Afterward, Birch, who hadn't even drawn his pistol, they said, shoot him too. They shot him in the thigh, tied him. They say tied him up and shot him in the head, then bayoneted him. So that's why they chose him, the first Christian martyr. How did it go down when they faked it? The Manchurian operation began August 9th with the Soviet invasion of the Empire of Japan's puppet state of Manchukuo. This is where Japan had its million-man army. And we know from the tunnels that we've all seen, you're not going to be able to firebomb Japan into submission. Most of their people are safe underground. But Japan, China, with their million man, if they can go in and conquer with the super surprise, well, that's going to end the war, not the bombs. And then they came up with their cover story. You don't survive this when you think you're on a peace plan. It's just everybody comes and gets you. And then you have to surrender. When you had won, it was risk. Who was going to win the war? Those countries weren't allies against Japan. They couldn't have done it without the Soviet Union. The Nazis surrendering exactly at the right time. Although the commencement of the invasion fell between the American atomic bombing on Hiroshima on the 6th of August and only hours before the Nagasaki bombing on 9 August, the timing of the invasion was planned well in advance. They knew it. They knew it was going to happen because they know what's going to happen now. We have fake wars going on. They're destroying the Bible. All they want to do is cover up. And I just saved this screenshot here. A message from Donald Trump today, less than 10 hours ago. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We're not going to take him out, kill. At least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this manner, Donald Trump. Wow, are you kidding me?
Seen a whole lot of lightning here.
Well,
Lightning with the storm. Very occasional.
So it's setting up for big storms, but who knows if it's going to happen? What do we know? We can't believe them. Everything's a lie, and it's always going to continue a lie because right now the father of lies is deceiving the nations. Whatever's happening now with Trump or in your country, it's part of it. It's going to drag it out, but it's not going to save your nation. And you go back to, now we've got some breathing room before what? Before what? Jesus comes back? I thought you were flat earth nation, golden age past. This is happening now, real time, not because I said so, because you know it. You also know it's flat earth nation. The golden age is past. The mud flood was Armageddon. Then they had the 1,000 years. Then they had another reaping. And then they had that orphan train thing that messed with your brain, because that means it had to be your grandparents, the most great grandparents and parents who were in on it and didn't get liquidated, didn't get lobotomized, didn't get sanitized or institutionalized. They bred, and now here we are. You'll never know who's one of them. You'll only know if you're not one of them. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakamain. Adios, amigos. That's